Hey, it's the Bet Las Vegas Odyssey Sports in Vegas. I know, kind of busy around here. Aces season has started. Golden Knights trying to win a championship. Mandatory minicamp has started. A baseball team's trying to come to Vegas. But the one thing we haven't talked about is the football. And I know it's the off season. And right now we're bringing in family. We haven't spoke in a while, but that's what happens when it's the off season. But that means we have a lot to talk about because we haven't talked to this gentleman since the week before the draft, I believe. So without further ado, from Odyssey Sports, Silver and Black today, Scott Gulbranson. Scott, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, man, Adrian. It's fun to watch. The only team that I really, from a professional standpoint, get to cheer for, that I pay attention to, is the Golden Knights, who now are 2 games away from perhaps becoming the second team. Remember, the second team from Las Vegas to win a major league championship, because, of course, the Aces won last year. People are, it'll be the first team. No, it will not be. The Aces were the first. So
it'll be the second, and they're going to have to piss off F1 and say, put the bulldozers away, stop the construction. We need the strip for the damn parade.
Yes, and it'll remind me, I know a lot of people have brought up for us old folks, Adrian, the UNLV 1990 championship and that big parade down the strip. I know the Aces had theirs last year, but it's just great to think about, and just amazing how Vegas has become just a sports mecca for this country. And let's hope the Knights do it. And then let's hope maybe in a couple years, the Raiders maybe can have that chance.
Well, look, and it's a great thing. First and foremost, I'm going to say it because I'm pushing my own agenda. Las Vegas is the sports capital of the world, my friends.
There you go.
And it will continue to do so. If anything, it's going to make a bigger imprint, to your point. But the one thing I do want to talk about is we do talk about the success that the Aces have had and the Golden Knights. And I think it was yesterday, game 2, Davante Adams was getting interviewed by TNT, even though he couldn't hear it because it was so loud inside of there. Is there anything that we can look into? Like, how do I ask this? Does this put pressure on the Raiders to be like, hey, come join the success of the other teams in the city, or no?
Well, I think, listen, I absolutely. I mean, when you're in a city and you have a team that's doing so well, listen, there's entertainment dollars, right? So you spend money, you go out, you see movies, you see sporting events, whatever it may be, and there's only so many dollars, and people want to go where a winner is. Las Vegas is a town that especially supports winners. That's why the Aces have done well. That's why the Golden Knights have done well. That's why the Aviators up in Summerlin have done well even. And so the Raiders, yeah, the pressure's on, but also the Raiders have had decades of futility. And so it's time for them to build something and win something. So they need to keep up with the Joneses, absolutely, in Las Vegas, because that's what it's about. Yes, they can make money. They can fill that stadium without being a champion. But that's not what I think anybody wants with a regular organization. And I know that's not what the fans in Raider Nation want. They want their team to finally get it together, compete, and win. And I know Davante Adams is a competitive dude. He's one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL. And that's what he wants too. So we're going to have to see what kind of journey they're on as they start minicamp this week.
And it's interesting because I remember we did our off-season review and Mo joined us. And one of the things that you talked about was how this team doesn't have a home field advantage. And I think it is interesting because, all the teams support each other, meaning that Aces players are at Golden Knights games, Golden Knights are at the Aces, everyone's at the Raiders are at everyone's going to every other game. And for the Raiders players, they're not going to admit it. They're not going to say it at a press conference to tell it to the media, but we're only human. And when you go into these environments and you see how crazy the crowds are for both the Golden Knights and the Aces, you have to think for them that, well, what if Allegiant Stadium was 90% us as opposed to 75, 80%, whatever the case may be, with all the fans from the other cities? And I guess since you did bring up Davante Adams and he had some interesting comments in an interview a few weeks ago, what did you make of those comments? Is that just someone who is very good at his job, who wants to reach the top of his profession, and he just wants to win? Or what'd you make of it?
Yeah, I think it was blown out of proportion a little bit, because if you read what he said,
because we're bored too.
No, there's no question. We all get there, right? I mean, we all have things to do, and when you talk for a living, you do shows for a living, like you and I do. You got to come up with stuff to talk about, right? But I think some of it was disingenuous. Some of the national media that doesn't cover the Raiders regularly, closely, took it and ran with it and made more out of it. If they would have read fully in context the story, they would have seen that it wasn't any big deal. He wasn't creating any problems. He wasn't calling anybody out. He was just merely stating a fact. He's a veteran. He is the leader in that room. He's the leader on the offense. Yes, Jimmy Garoppolo is the new quarterback, but at the same time, Devontae Adams holds a lot of weight, just like Josh Jacobs does. And Josh Jacobs has said stuff too. But they both have, I think, one thing in common, and that is, hey, if this is going to be a complete teardown and this team's going to be awful for the next 2 or 3 years, then maybe they don't want to stick around if that's in case what happens. Now, if they turn it around quickly, these draft picks hit, Jimmy Garoppolo stays on his feet and healthy, and they actually compete, then it's a different story. So I think that's what you're looking at there, is the fact that these guys want to win. They're competitors. They're both at the top of their game at their position. And so what they say holds weight, but I wouldn't make it into be some soap opera drama.
I am legally obligated to ask you about Tom Brady, and I do know, again, Silver and Black Today, be sure to check him out. I know that a couple episodes ago, you guys kind of went into this, and it's hoopla now that Brady is a part of the ownership. I will say, the one thing I'll say to this, not to feed into the conspiracy theory, but with Miami, that was the plan before Brian Flores blew it up and the lawsuit happened and Brady's like, I'm out of here. That was reported on and wasn't really talked about enough because of the lawsuit that kind of took away the conversation. But it's interesting to me that here we are 2 years later or 1 year later. When was it? It was a year ago. Was it 2 years ago? I don't know. We're in the offseason.
Yeah,
2 years ago that was the blueprint and that was the plan to come in through ownership and that he wanted to play for Miami. And that's how he kind of did it. But with all that being said, what do you make of all this? Because I know, some people are getting very excited with the Photoshops again.
I'll tell you what. So for your listeners and viewers out there, mark it right here. Time code. You ready? Tom Brady will never, ever, ever play it down for the Las Vegas Raiders. He is not coming back to football. I will eat a shoe if he comes back. I will eat a shoe on your show if he comes back to play for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'll tell you why, Adrian, and you and I both can relate to this. We're both fathers. We have kids, right? And Tom Brady, as you know, obviously, because he's a celebrity and the GOAT at quarterback position in the NFL, highly publicized divorce, okay? His kids are in Miami. That's where they're going to be. That's where they're going to stay. So being an owner in the Las Vegas Raiders, flying out on his private plane on a Friday or a Saturday to catch the Sunday game and hobnob with the ownership and the players, that's all great. He can be home by Monday to see his kids off to school. He has family obligations. We forget that these are human beings. We forget that when you have a family going through something like that, it's why I believe he had a terrible year, not because of his age last year. I think it was because of that. Anybody who's had issues with family, we all have, how distracting it can be. And that's your priority. So I think Tom Brady is putting his children ahead of that. Could he play a couple more years? Probably. Are the Raiders a Tom Brady away from winning a Super Bowl? No way. If you are, you're spending way too much time at the dispensary. He is not the answer. He is not going to play football. And the Raiders are not a quarterback away from a Super Bowl.
No, 100%. And this is going to be a very big picture question because we haven't talked in so long. So take into account, basically, free agency is over. You know what I'm saying? There'll be roster cuts, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Minor transaction deals. Obviously, the draft happened as well. What do you make of some of the moves and where this team is at now? And we'll get to Jimmy G here in a second right after.
Yeah. Well, I think, listen, the Raiders addressed many of their needs. I say many because they had a lot of them, okay? You look at every level of the defense, the Raiders need significant upgrades. They did so. You look at Tyree Wilson drafting. If he is healthy, by the way, by camp and can get out there, he might not be healthy by camp, and we might see him a couple games into the season, but he can be a game changer there for them on the defensive line, especially if Chandler Jones, now he's lost weight, he looks better. Can he regain his form? I don't know. He's older now, so we'll see. And of course, you have the great Max Crosby, but they needed defensive tackles. They needed linebackers. They needed safety. They needed cornerback. They addressed some of those in the draft. And I think those players will see. I mean, you can't pass judgment on the draft until February, until the season's over to see how these guys do. But I will tell you, they have massive holes still on defense. They have no linebacking core. You could talk to me about the acquisition of Spillane from the Steelers, all that stuff. No. They do not have a guy who can play linebacker in coverage to me at an elite level in the NFL. That's a problem. Then you look at the defensive front. They've got better there, but there's question marks. Safety, they still have some questions. Of course, young guys there as well, too. So still a lot of needs. Then you turn to the offensive side of the ball. We don't know what's happening with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs said it himself. He said, listen, if you want me to come on, if you're going to improve this team and I'm going to come out there and be a guy for you, great. I'll sign the tender for the franchise tag. But if it looks like we're going to be a 2-15 season, and I got to be the guy who carries the whole offense, then you're going to have to pay me. So I think that's why he's holding back. People are making a big deal of the fact that he's not at mandatory minicamp. He can't go. It's not that he's holding out. He can't go. He's not under contract. He hasn't signed his contract. Plus, a veteran missing minicamp, doesn't matter, right? A lot of veterans don't, especially coming off a rushing title. So you look at the situation, Adrian, and I think that there's a lot of question marks. A lot of fans are negative. I don't think you should be overly negative because it's early, but I think we're going to have to wait till July, till camp rolls in, and start to see how things are falling into place. But the Raiders have a lot of question marks. They have a tough schedule. And so I think it's going to be an up and down year. But if you can see progress, then I think Raider Nation could walk away from it, even if they don't make the playoffs, feeling better if those young talent comes along like it wasn't able to under the Gruden and Mayock regime.
This question might be a little bit too early to ask you, obviously, because there's men in shorts and pads out there, and that's all we got with mandatory minicamp. But from the offset and looking at this roster, and you brought up a lot of holes everywhere, but you started off with the defense, and rightfully so. Brought up the linebacking core. It's a lot of newcomers that they're relying on. And exceeding performance from some of the guys that are on this roster. So flat out, do you think that this Raiders defense is going to be worse than it was last year?
Boy, that's a good question, a tough question. I think it's overall, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Like you said, is there going to be whopper of a deal on defense? No, probably not. When you look at who's still available out there, could there be some kind of trade still? There could be, because we're post June 1 now with a contract situation, but it got better in spots. I think it got better up front. It got better at end with the draft pick there. But it got worse at linebacker. We're still unsure on safety. Trayvon Morrig, who was a star 2 years ago as a rookie, really struggled last year. So if he can come along, then perhaps that changes things. But I think it's going to be dicey. And I think on the offense, of course, you got to look at quarterback too. So when you look at the Raiders overall, improvements in some areas, they've kind of treaded water in others, and they've gone backwards in some.
And let's get to Jimmy G. In this. What's going on? Like, so he was hurt and they knew he was hurt, and then they were supposed to do the press conference, and then he didn't sign the deal because they wanted to just make sure dot the T's with like a whole bunch of just making sure that the Raiders are okay if ultimately he can't play. Like, what's the deal here? What's going on?
So there's two things here, Adrian, and I think people have to compartmentalize this because they haven't been. When we found out about the foot addendum, right? When we found out about that, people went nuts. Why didn't they tell? Oh, that's why the press conference was delayed. And it was why the press conference was delayed. But credit the Raiders. Now, of course, here's where the fans who wanted to say I'm a shill for the Raiders will tell me I'm being a shill, but I'm going to say it. The Raiders were smart enough. They found the injury. The 49ers knew about it too. The 49ers told him not to get surgery. The Raiders found it and said, no, we want you to get surgery. Let's do an addendum. They agreed to that, and they changed the structure of the contract so he would not get any money until he played one game. Okay. And then it was fully guaranteed. So no bonus. He has no money from the Raiders at this point. So you look at that situation. The addendum itself only covers the second metatarsal in the foot. If he breaks his arm, blows out his knee, doesn't cover it, you're on the hook for the money. Okay. So just so people understand that. But I think the compartmentalization I'm talking about here is the Jimmy G, or Jimmy Glass, as some people call him, and the injury prone status that he has, one, and this foot issue in number two. They're two separate issues, believe it or not. The first issue is him being injury prone. The Raiders made that decision already. So if you're going to criticize them for that decision, which Mo has done on our show and I have done on our show, then fine, do that. And I think that that's valid. The one on the foot, not a big deal. If you look at, and this is where people don't just are not familiar with how the league works. Every year, there are hundreds of veterans who sign contracts with NFL teams with the same type of addendum, okay? It's just Jimmy G is the starting quarterback, the most important position on the field. So I think that's where the situation arises, and the Raider fans are nervous. Look, Derek Carr was jettisoned.
The
So now
Raiders
you
didn't help with that, though. I will say that the fact
no,
that it got to the point where they're delaying the press con, like you have media members in the media room, just like,
right,
what's going on,
right,
guys?
absolutely.
So
And
that's a bad look. I just wanted to add that in.
perception is everything, Adrian. I agree with you 100%. And listen, they're not always the most forward organization. I mean, if you look at when they had the mandatory rookie mini camp, I think there were only 5 or 4 teams in the NFL that wouldn't allow the media in, and the Raiders were one of them. So that's their decision. It's their business. They can run it how they want.
Thought it
But
was just
certainly,
me. Anyway,
certainly the perception, you're right. In today's society, especially with digital media, perception is reality. So it looked like they were hiding something. That's why it blew up so many months later, because nobody was forward about it. And it could have been easy to say, hey, listen, we found an issue. He's having surgery. We're good to go. We have ourselves covered. If something doesn't go right, let's move. But for whatever reason, they decided not to tell anybody.
and just to add on to your point of like this, Jimmy G is not. This is not an outlier situation. This is hundreds of players in the league that have some type of deal with whatever injury they're doing, and there's an addendum in there. The reason we do know is because the Raiders handle it to where it's now public, and that's why. Because we wouldn't have known, it just would have been a part, and it's just one of those things that we don't pay attention to. With everything, with all that being said, you even brought up the schedule. I forgot that the schedule dropped. I already have them 17-0. I always go 17-0.
So you're the one guy. No,
yeah, no, last year I was too. I was incorrect. And I'll still be incorrect, but hey, whatever. With all that being said, like what's the where are we at, man? And I know it's early, so it's basically we're all at, we can't wait, and it'll be here soon enough with training camp getting underway here in the next few weeks. But just where are you at with the Raiders so far with all these moves heading into this next season?
Well, again, I think it's a big question mark. And Mo and I did our early kind of schedule drop prediction, if you will, just guesstimation. I shouldn't even call it a prediction. And we had them at 7 or 8 wins, right? So they were 6 wins last year, 7 or 8 this year. That was predicated on the fact that we both believe Jimmy Garoppolo will not play more than 10 or 11 games based on history. Now, hopefully we're wrong. Hopefully he gets out there, does not get hurt, and plays every single game, and they win 10. I still don't think they make the playoffs. The AFC West is too competitive. The AFC is too competitive. Look what the Jets did. Everybody got better for the most part that was at the top of the conference, including Baltimore, signing their contract to a long-term, Lamar Jackson. So I look at the Raiders, and I still think the Raiders are a season or two away in this kind of mini rebuild, whatever you want to call it, from being a true competitive playoff contender. And that's tough, I know, for fans to hear.
Scares me,
but
Scott.
It is. And they have to address the quarterback position long term too over the next couple of years, or that boat could sail. And in that division where now you have Sean Payton, I think you'll have a resurgent quarterback in Denver with Russell Wilson. And of course, you have the Chiefs who are going to get better. They're on the verge of getting DeAndre Hopkins for unbelievable. So you look at that kind of stuff, everybody's getting better. The Chargers will lose just because the ownership and the organization suck. But other than that, it's a competitive division.
The part of me that works for the Sporting Tribune just left at that.
Yes.
And Chargers fans watching. 2 quick questions before we get out of here. One that I feel obligated just because we are here in Las Vegas. There's the reports of a Colts, quarterback, Isaiah Rodgers Jr., I believe, that's about to get suspended for gambling. We've had Lions players that got suspended for gambling and then just cut, even though they got suspended. We had 5 Commanders players. Obviously, my guy that's with the Jaguars now that was in Atlanta that I can't remember his name, the wide receiver. This is starting to bubble up. What do you make of it? Because there's a part of me that's like, I can't go watching any sporting event within 30 seconds hearing or seeing the logos of DraftKings or FanDuel. And it's like if I worked at a beer company, I wouldn't be surprised if I drank a beer. That doesn't. I'm not trying to take the responsibility away from the person.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they don't have control of themselves.
Correct.
But I'm just saying, if you're inundated with it, I'm not surprised. What do you make of all this?
Well, so it's just interesting from many facets, Adrian. And number one, let's start with the fact that you're right, personal responsibility. These guys can bet on baseball. They can bet on basketball. They can bet on ping pong. They could bet whatever. They bet on horses. You just can't bet on football, right? So it's sort of like for most people who work at a workplace, like there are rules that you can't break and work there. For example, you can't date a coworker in most places, not everywhere. In our media business, actually, it happens a lot, but otherwise, in other areas, you can't fraternize, right? You can't date your boss. You can't do this, all that kind of stuff. So those are the rules. These guys know the rules. I've been to NFL preseason camp when they met with rookies. Back when I was in the software business working at Intuit and we did TurboTax, we went to the New York Jets every year. We sat with them and did a financial training. So I got to go through all the different sessions. These guys know exactly what they can and what they can't do and what the punishment is. Now, the flip side of that coin is the NFL is about making money. The NFL is a entertainment business. It is not a sporting league. It is an entertainment business. The money that is involved right now in sports with gambling, and we know that from living in Las Vegas, where it was always a business and highly regulated, is massive. So it's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. The integration of the two will continue to grow as technology grows. So it's here to stay. So these guys have to know that they can't bet on football. I mean, just plain and simple. And so I feel for them in one way, but in another way, I don't. And I think it's going to have to be, that's why the punishment is so harsh, because the NFL knows it has to keep integrity of the game. I use air quotes with that because they're taking money from gambling. Players can't gamble, but they can take money from the casinos to name stadiums and all that stuff. So it's a little bit contradictory, but you know what? They're the boss. And if you want to work in it, you have to pay attention to the rules. You have to abide by the rules. So these guys have to do it. It's interesting, though, that we have not seen it in other sports as much. It happens in other sports, but we have not seen it be as prevalent as we have in the NFL.
Yeah, and I also, the thing that's kind of like a damn shame is the length of some of these suspensions. And like, I think it's been brought up with Isaiah going on right now that this was just a whole bunch of $20, $50 like meaningless type of things. But hey, that's where it starts, I guess. The also interesting part is that I guess I'm kind of sympathetic to is if this does continue and it does at a higher rate, everyone's just gonna bash the players. Why? Because who's paying for all these commercials and everything? I don't expect ESPN to turn around and be like, wait a minute, because why would you? Because money's what talks. And if they're feeding the pig, they're not going to say anything, and it's just going to be on the players. But at the end of the day, like you said, there also needs to be the responsibility on the person itself to have some control and not do it. It's not the end of the world not asking yourself to bet on your sport. Hell, you can do it for the NBA and MLB, and that we wouldn't have thought was possible 5 days ago or 5 years ago. Last question before we get you out of here. The true sign that football is back is not that mandatory camp has started throughout the league, including the Raiders today. It is that tomorrow, when this interview drops, actually, we're recording on the 6th. This will come out Wednesday, June the 7th, is also the first trailer for Madden 24. So with that being said, my friend, I need your guess for who's going to be the cover boy.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to be Aiden O'Connell. I'm kidding. So people can get mad at him wearing number 4.
Oh, interesting about that. I'll tell you off air about that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, who are you going with though?
I look at the big rumor is Josh Allen, right? And so I'm going to roll with Josh Allen because I think
Bills player ever on the cover.
First Bills player ever on the cover, because before that, I mean, you had several Bills that could have been on the cover. Jim Kelly was a great quarterback, but that the game was in its infancy and they didn't do the player thing back then. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. I know it's conventional thinking, but it makes a lot of sense for where the league's at, where he's at, and looking at Lamar already having been on it, Mahomes already been on it. Who's the next guy? I think
Jalen, possibly Justin Jefferson. Some people are saying Stephon Diggs, possibly.
He might get traded or dropped. I don't think it'll be him.
Joe Burrow. I'm trying to look at some names. I need to make my pick.
When's the last time a receiver was on the cover?
It's been a minute. The interesting thing is that, for the longest time in sports video games, well, actually, it's only actually happened to Madden where there's been multiple covers of the same, because Patrick Mahomes was on it himself, and then the year they did Brady and Mahomes. It'd be tough for me as a marketer if I work at EA Sports and I justify having Josh Allen be on the cover as opposed to Joe Burrow, just because Joe Burrow is already much more of a He's just more of he's a better person to be a spokesperson. Like Josh Allen has like that shaving, one of the Gillette, I think he has a Gillette
Gillette. Yeah.
commercial that
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just whatever. I'm going with Joe Burrow. You're going with Josh Allen. I think you're correct. I think it's going to be
Well,
Josh Allen, but we'll see.
my peeps in Cincinnati will be very happy if it's Joe Burrow. I will not stay on the shelves in Southwest
First,
Ohio.
he would be the first Bengals player to be on the cover.
Yeah.
Bengals have never had it. Bills have never had it. The Browns somehow have. The Cardinals have. I'm trying to think of obscure
Right.
team. The Titans
Well,
have.
and
Titans have
Adrian,
two.
you know the Bengals' biggest connection with Las Vegas, right?
My guy, what's his name? Right.
Icky Woods.
Icky. Yes, there it is.
Yes.
Last thing before we go real quick. I don't know if you know this, but I used to be a huge Madden player. My dad used to take me to Madden challenges. He took me
Nice.
to 7 NFL stadiums to compete at the tournaments when they had them there.
Wow.
So Madden tournaments, just to let you know, the official ones are either 2 minutes or 4 minute quarters, quick clock. Meaning that these guys who are pros know how to handle one possession a half.
Yeah.
So I say all of that to say, I think that it would be smart for an NFL team to hire a professional Madden player to help the head coach with time management because they work in such tight spaces. What do you say as someone who does not play Madden like that? Is it ridiculous, or do you get what I'm trying to say?
It's interesting because I mean, I play Madden. I don't play it like that. You're absolutely correct. I play my sons and we still have fun. But I will tell you that there's something to be said for that. You know, a lot of people, especially guys my age and older, poo-poo that idea, right? Because they don't play it, they don't understand what's going on. But if you play Madden at that level, you understand the clock, you understand the play call. If you have the playbook, I could see it happening. Listen, it's no longer kind of a pipe dream. Somebody might do that. You could easily have a consultant there with you that knows Madden, knows your team because of the playbook. You open up the playbook to them, they become an employee and suddenly do it. So listen, Adrian, I've seen so much change in the course of my life that I do not in any way, I would not laugh at that. And I would not say it's ridiculous. And I could say it's possible. Absolutely.
I will say my last little story time because we're just talking now. Last year, and I know this because when Madden came out, we actually had some of the main people join us because of John Madden and kind of get the inside scoop on all that. And I talked to him, and there's a lot of players that get frustrated. They're called cheese plays, which are easy plays that are very hard to stop. Sometimes they finesse the game rather than it's an actual good football play. So in the offseason, when the league has these symposiums where all the defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators go out, EA goes to them. They went to the defensive one last year, and the guy said, "Hey, I want to show you this. How would you stop this? Because this is a rampant problem, and we don't know how to change it within the game." That defensive coordinator said, "Hold on a second. I'm actually going to give this to my offensive coordinator because this is a pretty good goddamn play. And it's not cheating. It's just a good play." So I'm for it. I need a Madden Pro on the coaching staff. Raiders, Chargers.
There you go.
Chargers, you should probably be a part of that. But Scott, before we get you out of here, any plugs on what's coming with Silver and Black today?
Well, we're just continuing to roll through the summer on Silver and Black today. Myself and Mo Moten, who's the national NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. A lot coming up. We'll talk a little bit about OTAs. We're not going to crown somebody a great player on OTAs playing in helmets and shorts. We're not going to do that, but we got lots to talk about. We're going to have some incredible guests coming up, including our book tour. We like to do our summer book tour every year. We go through some NFL and Raiders themed books. So we're going to get you through that, get you to the end of July when camp rolls around. And of course, we'll keep an eye on the transaction wire and see if the Raiders do anything. They seem to be, based on their 3-hour media day yesterday, quote unquote content day, they seem to be happy with where they're at. They believe in what they have, just like they did on the offensive line last year. So there might not be any movement, to your point earlier, Adrian, but we're going to keep you abreast on that. So wherever you get your podcast, just search Silver and Black today. We appreciate the subscription.
Boom, and follow him at LV and follow him at LV Gully. We need to go to commercial and I need some water. Scott, thank you.
As always, my friend, take care, Adrian.